September 23, 2006. 9:00 p.m., 35-year-old pork seller Shi Yuejun is about to kill 12 people. He drives 15 minutes from Tonghua village to Liuhe town, Jilin Province. First target, Li Zhenjun, 40-year-old slaughterhouse manager. In May, Li charged Shi processing fees, Shi deemed extortionate. 4 months of obsessive brooding turned a business dispute into a death sentence. Li's family is away. He's alone. When Li steps outside, Shi attacks without warning, blade driven deep with the precision of a man who's butchered animals his entire life. Li Zhenjun drops to the ground and dies without making a sound. Shi loads the body into his truck, drives to Tongmei Road, dumps it in a roadside ditch, returns to Liuhe, buys rat poison, supposedly for suicide. But then he calculates, murder equals execution anyway. So why stop? Over the next 6 days, Shi Yuejun will murder 12 people and wound 5 others in a rampage that will shock the entire province. Against him, 2,000 police officers, 1,000 armed troops, 12,000 civilian volunteers, one of the largest manhunts in Jilin Province history. This is the story of how an ordinary rural pork seller became a calculating killing machine, and how 6 days of accumulated rage destroyed families and shattered an entire community forever. Shi Yuejun was born on March 5, 1971, in the remote village of Tonghua, Liuhe Township, Liuhe County, deep in the forested hills of Jilin Province. His family had raised pigs for generations, a grueling but steady occupation that provided modest income. In 1988, at just 17 years old after completing basic education, Shi took over the family business from his aging parents. For the next 18 years, Shi followed the same brutal daily routine. He raised pigs from birth, feeding them, tending to illnesses, managing their growth. When they reached slaughter weight, he killed them himself in a makeshift shed behind the family house. Then he butchered the carcasses, loaded the meat onto his truck, and hauled it to farmers' markets in Tonghua and surrounding settlements. The work was physically demanding, financially uncertain, and socially isolating. His neighbors knew him simply as Little Shi, a common affectionate nickname in Chinese culture. They described him as an exceptionally quiet man, intensely focused on business, who haggled fiercely over every jin of pork by weight to maximize his slim profit margins. But crucially, no one in the community ever saw him start arguments or display overt anger. Once, when another farmer publicly disputed his usual market spot, Shi simply yielded the location without protest and moved to sell elsewhere. To outsiders, he seemed passive, even meek. In the early 1990s, Shi married a local woman who worked as a school teacher in the village. By 2006, they had 2 children, a 14-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. Their combined household income was relatively substantial by rural standards, enough to afford a comfortable home and occasional luxuries like family trips. But beneath this facade, a dangerous psychological storm was silently gathering strength. Shi's wife later described him to police investigators as an extreme introvert with virtually no social circle outside his immediate business contacts. He was prone to long periods of brooding silence, often sitting alone for hours, replaying perceived slights and injustices in his mind like an endless loop. Families of the later victims reported to police that their business interactions with Shi had been increasingly strained in recent years. He seemed to view even routine disputes or rejections as deliberate personal attacks designed to humiliate him. Police investigations after the murders revealed that Shi had been formally diagnosed, with clinical depression. 2 months before the September killings, he sought professional treatment from a psychiatrist in Tonghua City, which temporarily improved his mood and gave his family hope for recovery. Desperate for a psychological reset, Shi and his wife spent 10,000 yuan, a considerable sum representing months of hard-earned savings, on trips to major cities including Shanghai, Suzhou, and Hangzhou. They hoped new experiences would break the cycle of rumination and negativity. It did not work. The grudges kept accumulating. Every fine from a livestock inspector felt like a deliberate attack on his dignity. Every shopkeeper who rejected his meat became part of a conspiracy against him. Every farmer who haggled too aggressively was trying to destroy his livelihood. Shi internalized each incident, turning minor business frustrations into existential threats to his identity and worth. And on that fateful night of September 23, 2006, the psychological dam finally burst completely. Fresh from dumping Li Zhenjun's body on the roadside, Shi drives his blood-stained truck directly to the home of Wang Yuliang, the 34-year-old deputy director of Ermi's local livestock management station. Wang had personally issued Shi a fine earlier in the year for failing to comply with mandatory animal quarantine regulations, a routine bureaucratic enforcement that Shi interpreted as targeted persecution. In Shi's distorted worldview, this was yet another example of petty officials crushing hard-working common people. Shi parks his truck and approaches the house, knocking firmly on the door. A voice from inside calls out, asking who is there at this late hour. "It's me. I came to pay the fine," Shi responds in a calm, steady voice that betrays no hint of the violence about to unfold. Wang Yuliang, completely unsuspecting, opens the door to let him inside. The moment the door swings open, Shi explodes into violent action. He bursts through the entrance and begins striking with rapid, mechanical precision. Wang Yuliang is the first to fall, crumpling in the entryway. His 26-year-old wife, Zhang Lili, rushes from the back room at the sound of her husband's cries and is cut down immediately. Wang's elderly parents, his 79-year-old father Wang Guilu and 72-year-old mother Li Xiumei, are murdered in their own living room. 4 members of the Wang family are slaughtered in their home within minutes. Wang Yuliang's brother, Wang Yuhong, who lives nearby, hears the commotion and comes running. He bursts into the house and immediately grabs a nearby shovel, swinging it at Shi with desperate fury. The shovel connects several times before Shi manages to drive his knife into Wang Yuhong's stomach. During the chaotic struggle, Shi himself sustains a wound to his leg, and one of his knives snaps under the force of the blows. Realizing he is injured and that help may be coming, Shi flees to his truck and speeds away into the darkness. Wang Yuhong, bleeding heavily from his abdominal wound, staggers across the street to the home of the Tang couple, pounding desperately on their door and gasping, "Call the police! The Wangs are all dead! Call the police now!" When medics and police finally arrive at the scene, they encounter unimaginable horror. Wang Yuliang and his father lie motionless in massive pools of blood on the floor. Wang's mother sprawls lifeless on the traditional heated Kong bed next to the barely conscious Zhang Lili and the couple's terrified 3-year-old son, who is physically unharmed but covered in his family's blood. Zhang Lili, despite immediate medical attention, succumbs to her multiple wounds while being transported to the hospital. The 3-year-old child becomes an orphan in a single night of violence. 4 people dead, 1 critically wounded, and Shi Yuejun drives on into the darkness with blood still wet on his hands and clothes. Emboldened by the success of his attacks and convinced he has nothing left to lose, Shi returns to Tonghua village, his own home territory where he has lived his entire life. Directly across the street from his family home stands the small shop owned by Liu Guohua, a 43-year-old merchant. Liu had previously refused to stock and sell Shi's pork in his store, citing concerns about quality and pricing, a business rejection that Shi had brooded over for months as yet another humiliation. Shi approaches the shop and knocks on the door, pretending to be a late-night customer seeking snacks or supplies. Liu Guohua opens the door with a friendly, unsuspecting greeting. Shi kills him almost instantly in the doorway with multiple knife strikes. He then storms into the living quarters behind the shop and corners Liu's wife, Cao Deqing, in the bedroom. Cao fights desperately for her life, struggling and screaming as Shi attacks. She receives 37 separate stab wounds to her chest, back, and arms in the frenzied assault. By some miracle, Cao survives the attack, but she is left permanently paralyzed from her injuries and will spend the rest of her life confined to a wheelchair. Shi leaves the shop and moves methodically down the dark village streets to the home of Wang, another farmer who had refused to slaughter pigs for Shi earlier in the year, complaining that the offered payment was insultingly inadequate. "I brought a pig to deliver as we discussed," Shi lies smoothly when Wang answers the door. Once inside the house, Shi suddenly plunges a knife deep into Wang's stomach. Wang survives but suffers severe internal injuries requiring emergency surgery. Realizing that his truck is now too recognizable and that roadblocks may already be forming, Shi abandons the vehicle at the edge of the village. He continues on foot through dark fields and forests to Judayuan village in the neighboring town of Sanyuanpu. His next target is Yu Hongyang, a local shop owner and slaughterhouse inspector who had issued Shi yet another fine for regulatory violations. "I need to borrow money urgently. Family emergency," Shi pleads when Yu answers his door. When Yu turns away to fetch his wallet, Shi attacks from behind, delivering several brutal strikes to Yu's abdomen. But Yu is younger and stronger than the previous victims. He fights back fiercely, managing to slash Shi's hand and force him to drop the knife. Shi quickly draws a backup blade and slashes Yu's wife across the face when she attempts to intervene. As Yu crumples from his wounds, he uses his last moments of consciousness to shout for his wife to run and bolt herself in a back room. She obeys and survives. Shi, now wounded himself, and hearing approaching voices, slips away on foot into the darkness. In one single night of carnage, 7 people murdered, 4 people critically wounded. Shi Yuejun, the quiet, passive pork seller known as Little Shi, has transformed into a phantom killer stalking his own community. Word of the Wang family massacre spreads through the region in the early hours of September 24th. Villagers and survivors quickly identify Shi from descriptions: the pork guy with the old truck, Little Shi from Tonghua. Within less than an hour of the bodies being discovered, police have his name. By 3:30 a.m., roadblocks are hastily erected at every exit from the affected area. The Tonghua Bureau of Public Security immediately announces a reward of 100,000 Wang for information leading to Shi's capture, an enormous sum that represents years of income for most rural residents. The manhunt rapidly escalates into one of the largest police operations in provincial history. The public security bureaus of 3 major cities, Tonghua, Baishan, and Liuhe, combine their resources, deploying 2,000 officers from their municipal departments. The Jilin People's Armed Police contributes an additional 1,000 heavily armed troops trained in military tactics. By the end of the first day, more than 12,000 people are involved in the search, including local militia members and terrified villagers who are pressed into service to help comb the mountainous terrain. Police helicopters buzz overhead, scanning the dense forests with thermal imaging cameras. Trained bloodhounds are brought in to follow scent trails through the wilderness. Every house, barn, shed, and abandoned building within a 50-kilometer radius is systematically searched at gunpoint. Shi's abandoned truck is quickly located at the entrance to Tonghua village, but the man himself has completely vanished into the mountains and forests he has known intimately since childhood. Villagers lock and barricade their doors before sunset. Children are kept home from school. Markets close early. For 4 days, despite the massive deployment of personnel and resources, Shi remains invisible, surviving on whatever he can forage, sleeping in caves or abandoned structures, moving only at night through terrain too rugged for vehicles. By September 27th, the 4th day of the manhunt, Shi is starving and exhausted. He descends from a mountain slope near Tonghua, driven by desperate hunger. He approaches the isolated home of Sun Honglian, a 45-year-old farmer, and his wife Liu Jifan. Shi knocks on their door and begs, "Please, some food. I'm a traveler who got lost in the mountains." Sun and Liu, being kind and hospitable people, feed the exhausted stranger without any suspicion about who he really is. But as Shi eats and recovers his strength, he realizes these people will almost certainly report seeing him to the authorities once they hear news broadcasts or talk to neighbors. He cannot afford witnesses. In cold calculation, Shi turns on his benefactors and murders them both in their home. Sun Honglian and Liu Jifan become the 9th and 10th victims, killed solely because they showed compassion to a stranger in need. When forensic teams arrive at the crime scene the following day, they immediately link the murders to Shi based on the methodology and evidence left behind. On September 28th, China's Ministry of Public Security in Beijing issues a Class A warrant for Shi's arrest, the highest level of wanted notice in the country, reserved only for the most dangerous fugitives. The reward is increased to 50,000 Wang. The dragnet tightens further as even more personnel join the search. September 29th, 5:40 a.m., the 6th day of the manhunt, Shi is discovered hiding in the home of Zhao Yufu in Liuhe village, part of Lunan Township. He murders Zhao Yufu and his wife Guan Xiumei in their beds before they can react. A neighboring villager named Liu Jinping hears the commotion and rushes over to help, receiving a deep slash across his left arm during a brief struggle with Shi. Fleeing outside into the dawn light, Shi encounters Zhao Jinkai, a 41-year-old man in the building's courtyard, and strikes him down as well to eliminate another witness. 12 dead, 5 wounded. The incident is immediately reported to police at 5:50 a.m. This time, officers are close enough to respond within minutes. Several hours later, around noon on September 29th, an exhausted and cornered Shi Yuejun is finally apprehended in a cornfield behind Liuhe village. He is too weak to resist. 6 days of terror finally end. Shi is immediately transported to Changchun, the provincial capital of Jilin Province, for intensive interrogation. Under questioning, he confesses to all 12 murders and 5 attempted murders. He tells investigators that he had originally intended to kill at least 5 more people before being captured. When asked directly about his motive, Shi gives a chilling answer: "Revenge for the humiliations I endured from society." At his trial, Shi attempts to change his story. He claims he came to Li Zhenjun's property only to steal a pig. Li caught him. Shi believed Li was armed, so he killed him in what he characterized as self-defense. Then, realizing he would receive the death penalty anyway, he decided to settle all his accumulated grudges at once. However, he admitted that the last 5 victims, Sun Honglian, Liu Jifen, Zhao Yufu, Guan Xiumei, and Zhao Jinkai, were complete strangers who had done nothing to him and were killed solely because he feared they would report him to authorities. The trial takes place at the Tonghua Intermediate People's Court on November 25, 2006, just 2 months after Shi's arrest. Security at the courthouse is unprecedented, with armed guards stationed at every entrance, mandatory identity checks for all attendees, and a complete ban on bags or recording devices. Shi's state-appointed defense attorney requests leniency, pointing to his client's complete lack of any prior criminal record and his full cooperation with authorities during custody. Shi himself pleads guilty to the charges, but insists he did not kill without reason and was driven into a desperate situation by society. The courtroom erupts with rage from victims' families. Sun Changli, the son of Sun Honglian, and Liu Jifen, suddenly grabs a brass nameplate from a courtroom desk and hurls it at Shi when Shi claims he was forced to kill his parents. Sun is immediately restrained by bailiffs and forcibly removed from the courtroom. Another victim's son, Zhao Chunxiang, also attempts to rush at Shi and has to be physically dragged out by multiple guards. Throughout this chaos, Shi remains mostly emotionless and impassive. At one point, he even addresses the media attention his case has generated, stating that he does not consider himself a serial killer or mass murderer, for which the judge issues a stern warning for contempt of court after Shi smiles slightly. Shi concludes his final statement by acknowledging that he deserves to die and requesting that his execution be carried out before the end of the year, saying, "A life for a life must be paid. Debts must be returned." When asked about compensation for victims' families, Shi refuses, claiming he has no money or assets to pay. His wife and elderly mother, who are present in the courtroom, are escorted out by guards as they break down in tears. At the conclusion of the 3-hour trial, Shi is found guilty of murder and robbery. He is sentenced to death and ordered to pay $831,681.39 in compensation to 6 co-plaintiffs representing the victims' families. Shi does not appeal the sentence. For just over 3 weeks, Shi is held in the Liuhe County Detention Center under 24-hour guard. On December 19th, the day before his scheduled execution, he is permitted a final meeting with his family. He urges his mother and sister not to cry and to take care of his children. Witnesses report that Shi appears outwardly calm but eats almost nothing for dinner and suffers from severe insomnia during his final night. On the morning of December 20th, 2006, he is given his last meal, a plate of dumplings, a traditional Chinese comfort food. At 9 a.m., Shi is transported to Liuhe County Court, where officials from the Tonghua Intermediate People's Court formally read him the execution warrant. Shi shows no visible emotion, but frequently glances around the room. At 9:50 a.m., he is escorted to the execution site. a hill near the Liuhe County funeral home. Local residents, mostly families of the victims, have gathered to witness justice. At precisely 10:00 a.m., Shi Yuejun is executed by a single burst of gunfire. He was 35 years old. From his first murder to his execution, exactly 88 days passed. Most of those present express satisfaction that justice has been served. However, some surviving victims express conflicted feelings and sadness for Shi's innocent family members. Cao Deqing, the paralyzed wife of Liu Guohua, who survived 37 stab wounds, states bluntly that she does not particularly care about Shi's death. She is far more concerned with how the court-ordered compensation will actually be paid to cover her mounting medical expenses and lifetime care needs. The Tonghua court issues a statement noting its intention to ensure the livelihood of Shi's wife and children, who have decided to move away from Tunggu village for the sake of the children's future and to escape the stigma. However, the court candidly admits it cannot guarantee that the agreed-upon compensation will actually be paid in full to each victim and their families, given Shi's lack of assets. 12 graves mark 12 destroyed families. 5 survivors carry permanent physical and psychological scars. Countless children grew up without parents because of 6 days in September 2006. Shi's 14-year-old daughter and 3-year-old son lost their father. His wife lost her husband. His mother lost her son. But their loss pales compared to the devastation visited upon the victims' families. The case remains known throughout China as the Tonghua 924 mass murder case. Psychologists studying the case point to multiple contributing factors: diagnosed clinical depression, extreme introversion, tendency toward obsessive rumination and harboring of grudges, perception of systematic humiliation, and feelings of powerlessness and injustice. What makes Shi different is not his feelings, but his choice to act on them through violence. Today, the villages of Tunggu, Ermi, Sanyuanpu, and Lunan continue on, but the memory remains. Li Zhenjun, Wang Yuliang, 34, Zhang Lili, 26, Wang Guilu, 79, Li Shumei, 72, Liu Guohua, 43, Yu Hongyong, Sun Honglian, 45, Liu Jifen, Zhao Yufu, Guan Xiumei, Zhao Jingkai, 41, 12 names, 12 lives, gone forever because one man could not let go. What do you think about this case? Could this tragedy have been prevented if someone had noticed the warning signs earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments below.